My name is Emily, and my parents missed every milestone in my life: graduation, wedding, even the birth of my first child, because they were too busy with their own stuff. Then, one night, they came to me and asked for $800,000 for their retirement. No questions, just an expectation. Have you ever had family ask for too much? I was just settling into my morning routine at the office, checking through my emails and prepping for the big meeting with an investor. I was focused, determined, the type of day that made you feel like you had everything under control. Until the door to my office opened without warning. "Emily, we need to talk." It was my mom and dad, Michael and Linda. The last people I expected to see walking into my workspace, let alone at this hour. They never came to the city unless it was for something big, or, in their case, a financial crisis. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Not really," my dad said. We need your help." I stood up from my desk, automatically feeling my stomach tighten. Help? My parents never asked for help. They were always the ones who tried to fix everything themselves. And now they were standing in front of me, both of them looking much older than I remembered. What's going on? Mom took a deep breath before speaking. "We've run out of money, Emily. We've tried everything, but the savings are gone. We need $800,000. My heart dropped into my stomach. $800,000, I echoed, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what she was saying. "Yes," Dad said quickly, his tone almost pleading. "For retirement. We want to live out our years without worrying about bills. You're the only one who can help us." I felt the weight of his words. The only one. "You've done so well, Emily," Mom added, her voice soft but firm. "We know you're in a position to help us. You've got a successful career now. You can afford it." I wasn't sure what bothered me more, their request or the timing. The urgency in their voices didn't sit right. "Why now?" I finally asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why are you asking me for this now, of all times?" My mom shifted uneasily, looking at my dad. "We've had setbacks, a couple of bad investments, and things just spiraled." I felt my gaze narrow. Setbacks? They were always vague when it came to explaining their finances, and now they wanted me to bail them out with no clear answers. Something felt off. As they continued talking, I caught a glimpse of the paperwork they handed me. The dates didn't add up, the details seemed rushed, and there was a sense of desperation in the air. This wasn't just a request. This was an ultimatum, and they were using guilt to pull me in. $800,000, I repeated quietly, more to myself than to them. "Emily, please," Dad said, his voice softer now. "We don't want to be a burden, but we've worked so hard all our lives. We just want peace in our retirement." They left shortly after. Their footsteps faded as the door closed behind them, but the weight of their request lingered in the air. The week after my parents left, everything felt off. The pressure was unbearable. I spent my days in meetings, but every conversation felt like it was somehow tied to them. My coworkers started mentioning the situation. I hadn't told anyone about the $800,000 request, but it was like it was written on my forehead. "You know," Mark said, his voice too casual for my liking, "I heard your parents were going through some financial trouble. I mean, it's not exactly a secret." I forced a smile, nodding along, but inside I was already on edge. Of course it wasn't a secret. Nothing ever stays that way in a small town. But hearing it at work, from Mark of all people, made my stomach twist. "I'm sure everything will work out," I said, trying to brush it off. "Oh, I'm sure it will. Just..." "Sounds like a lot, you know. $800,000. That's, a lot to ask of someone, even with your success. Are they counting on you for that?" I felt my face flush. I didn't answer. Not just because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't want to admit to anyone, least of all myself, how much I felt cornered. The next morning, I got a text from my mom. "Honey, just want to remind you that the decision is urgent. We really need to know by Friday." I blinked at the screen, feeling the familiar ache of being stuck in the middle of something I couldn't control. Friday. That was the deadline. They weren't giving me much room to breathe. The pressure didn't stop there. That afternoon, I ran into a neighbor, Sarah, in the elevator. She looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "I heard about your parents, Emily. That's a big ask. But you've always been so strong. If anyone can help them out, it's you." Her words hit like a freight train, a reminder that everyone expected me to do the right thing. I could almost feel the weight of the entire neighborhood's expectations pressing down on me. "Thanks, Sarah," I muttered, managing a tight smile. But inside, I was starting to crack. My mom and dad weren't just asking for help. They were creating a wall that I couldn't climb over, and everyone around me seemed to be building it higher, brick by brick. That night, Sophia called me. We'd been friends for years, but we hadn't talked much lately. She was one of the few people I could rely on to tell me the truth, no sugarcoating. "Em, we need to talk. You're not making any sense," she said, straight to the point, as always. I let out a breath. "What do you mean?" "You're letting them pressure you. You don't need to give them the money. You know that, right?" "I don't know," I admitted. "They're my parents, Soph. What am I supposed to do?" Sophia sighed, the sound full of frustration. "You have to stop thinking with guilt. This isn't your responsibility." "I get it, but—" I paused, glancing down at the phone. "It feels like I'm the only one who can fix it. They've got nothing left." "Nothing left? Or they've just made a series of really bad choices?" "There's a difference, Emily. You need to start looking at this situation with clearer eyes." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. "What do you want me to do?" "Gather the facts first. Don't just hand them the money. You need to know exactly what you're dealing with. Look at their finances. Ask the right questions." It was like a light bulb went off in my head. "Right," I muttered. "You're right." She gave a soft laugh. "I'm always right. Just don't do something stupid. They've had their chance. Now it's your turn to make the decisions, not them." After hanging up, I sat at my desk and stared at the email I'd drafted to my parents. I wanted to write back, "I need time," but the deadline was looming over me like a storm cloud. They were already expecting an answer by Friday, and if I didn't act fast, I'd be stuck. I needed to check their accounts. There was no way I was making this decision without understanding what I was really dealing with. The next day, I drove to the bank. As I pulled into the parking lot, a wave of dread washed over me. The deadline was too close, but if I didn't do this, I knew I would regret it. Before I walked in, I took a deep breath. I couldn't let the pressure of their expectations control me anymore. It was time to face this head on. But as I reached for the door handle, my phone buzzed. Another message from my mom. "Remember, we really need this by Friday. Don't forget, sweetheart. We're counting on you." I stopped for a second. The weight of those words almost knocked me off my feet. But I couldn't turn back now. I was already in too deep. Chapter 3. Uncovering the Truth. The next few days felt like a fog I couldn't shake off. Every time I picked up my phone, every time I opened an email, I was haunted by the decision hanging over me. The pressure from my parents was suffocating, but it was more than that. Something didn't sit right with me about their story. I sat at my desk, flipping through the documents they'd left behind. The papers seemed almost too perfect, too rehearsed. I was looking for something, anything, that might give me an answer, something that would make their request easier to digest. That's when I found it. A small detail buried in the contract they'd given me. The name of a bank, one I didn't recognize. It was a small line in a sea of numbers and financial jargon, but it caught my eye. I wasn't sure why, but something about it nagged at me. Why hadn't they mentioned this bank before? They always talked about their old reliable savings account, but this was different. I Googled the bank's name, and my stomach sank. It was a private investment firm that dealt in high-risk ventures, not exactly the kind of place someone like my parents would use. I pulled up my phone and texted Sophia. "Soph, I found something. I need your help." Her reply came in a minute later. "What did you find?" "A bank they never told me about. It's tied to something sketchy." Sophia didn't waste time. Get to the bottom of it, Em. This isn't just a bad investment. You're being played. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. She was right. The pieces were starting to fall into place. My parents had always been secretive with their finances, but this was a new level. I couldn't just let it slide. A few hours later, I was sitting in my car outside the bank. I hadn't planned to go this far, but I felt like I had no choice. This wasn't just a bad loan request. This was something much bigger, and I needed answers. When I walked in, the receptionist gave me a polite smile, but it was clear she had no idea who I was. I need to speak to someone about a recent transaction, I said, keeping my voice steady. She raised an eyebrow. May I ask, what kind of transaction? I hesitated. It's about an account, my parents' account. The smile faltered for just a moment. Please have a seat. I'll get someone for you. I sat, watching the door as it swung open and shut. Every second felt like it was stretching into an eternity. The receptionist came back and led me to an office in the back. A man in his 50s sat behind a large desk, his sleeves rolled up, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. Ms. Blunt, how can I assist you today? Are you familiar with Michael and Linda Blunt? I asked, keeping my tone businesslike. The man paused, glancing at the screen in front of him. Yes, we have a file here. Is everything okay with their account? I tried to keep my composure. I'm just trying to understand something. Why wasn't I informed of their activities with this bank? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Well, the account is under their name. If they haven't shared the details with you, I'm afraid I can't give you any specifics. I didn't buy it. I'm their daughter. I'm trying to figure out where this money is coming from. They've asked me for a substantial loan, and I'm trying to understand why. The man's eyes flickered to the screen again. He typed something, then looked up at me, his expression tight. The Blunts have been working with us for a few years now. We've helped them with some private investments. I believe they've been using the returns from those to fund their lifestyle. I could feel the blood rush to my face. And you're telling me they've been using high-risk investments without telling me? He didn't respond right away, but it was clear by his silence that there was more to the story than he was willing to admit. I stood up, my mind racing. This was bigger than I thought. They had been hiding more than just poor decisions. They had been planning this, whatever this was, long before they came to me for help. I walked out of the office, my thoughts spinning. As I got into my car, I pulled out my phone again. Soph, I need to talk. This is worse than I thought. They've been planning this for a while. Sophia replied instantly. You're not in this alone, Em. We'll figure it out. You've got the proof now. Just don't let them control you. But the problem was, they already were. I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just about helping my parents. It was about controlling my own life, my own future. And now I had to act before I got swallowed up by their mess. Chapter 4. The Point of No Return. It was a Friday, the deadline. I had spent the week wrestling with every piece of information I had uncovered, and still, it felt like I was playing catch-up. My parents had moved the goalposts again. Now it wasn't just a financial request, it was a full-on demand. Emily, please, my dad had said just that morning. We can't wait any longer. If you don't help us, things will get worse. You don't want that, do you? The guilt in his voice hit me like a ton of bricks. But what really bothered me was the urgency. I wasn't given a chance to breathe. And it wasn't just them. Everyone around me was piling on. Sophia tried to reason with me, but the more I heard, the more I felt like I was drowning in their expectations. Just give them the money, Sophia had said. Don't let them manipulate you. But it wasn't that simple. They weren't just asking. They were forcing me into a corner. I felt it in every text, every phone call, every word that dripped with desperation. That morning, I had found the final nail in the coffin, a message from my mom. Please, sweetheart, if you care about us, don't let us fall apart now. It was the kind of message that pushed all the right emotional buttons. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about money anymore. By noon, I was sitting in a conference room, staring at my laptop screen, waiting for the call from my parents. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating, before I opened my email. I had already drafted the message, but it felt like an impossible task. How could I hit send without feeling like I was sealing my own fate? The phone buzzed in front of me. It was my dad's number. My heart sank. I answered before it could ring twice. "Emily, I need an answer," he said, his tone flat, rehearsed. "We've been patient, but we're running out of time. Please don't let us down." I could almost hear the manipulation in his voice. The pressure was becoming unbearable. "Dad, Before I could finish, I heard a knock on the door. I glanced up. Sophia stepped into the room, her face stern. She closed the door behind her, her eyes locking onto mine. "You're not seriously going to do this, are you?" Her timing was impeccable, but I felt a pang of frustration. "Soph, you don't understand." "I do understand, Emily," she said, crossing her arms. "I've watched you take responsibility for everything for years. But this is too much. You can't just give in because they guilted you." I looked down at my phone again, knowing she was right, but I still couldn't shake the thought that I was betraying them by even considering it. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again. Another message from my mom. "If you don't do this for us, Emily, I don't know how we'll get through this. You're all we have left." The words stung. My hands shook as I set the phone down, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen. "What's really going on here, Emily?" Sophia asked, her voice softer now. "Have you noticed anything off? Any details that don't add up?" I thought about it. The papers, the dates, the urgency, they were all wrong. But there was one thing that really stood out. The financial statements my parents had given me weren't the ones I'd expected. I'd seen their real bank accounts before, years ago when we set up my trust fund, and they were never this vague. I opened the folder with their bank statements again. As I scanned through the numbers, I found a series of transactions that didn't match anything they'd told me. I narrowed my eyes, finding a string of wire transfers to a private account, an account linked to the same bank I had visited earlier. "Wait," Sophia leaned in, noticing the change in my expression. "What is it?" "They've been working with this investment firm, the same one I looked up." I felt the blood drain from my face. "And these transactions, they're huge, Soph. Like they've been laundering money through their account." Sophia froze, her eyes wide. "This isn't just about a bad investment. This is bigger." I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through the rest of the documents. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. "They planned this, didn't they?" I whispered. "This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate." The realization hit me like a truck. My parents weren't just in financial trouble. They were knee-deep in something far more dangerous, and now they were dragging me into it. Suddenly, the door opened again. My phone buzzed. "Emily, we're waiting," my dad's voice crackled through the speaker. "It's now or never." I couldn't breathe. The trap was set, and I had just stepped right into it. Sophia grabbed my arm. "You need to get out of there, Emily. You can't let them control you anymore." I stood up, my heart pounding. I couldn't just sit here anymore. I couldn't be a pawn in their game. But what now? What was the next move? I didn't have the answer, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to just roll over. I had to take control. It was time to change the game. And as I walked out of the conference room, I knew this was no longer just about money. It was about my future. Chapter 5. Hitting Rock Bottom. It wasn't until I sat there, staring at the pile of documents in front of me, that it hit me. I had been so focused on trying to help, trying to do the right thing for my parents, that I had completely missed the signs of manipulation, the signs of their deliberate attempts to pull me into their mess. I felt like a fool. My parents had always been good at putting on a show, but I had let myself believe their stories. Every time they came to me with their problems, I was there, ready to fix things, to save them. But all along, they were using me. I had allowed them to walk all over me, to make me feel responsible for their mistakes. And now, I could see it so clearly. I had been taken in by their guilt trips, their charm, their fake urgency. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all sinking in. The money, the lies, the way they made me feel like I was the only one who could save them. My stomach churned with regret, and I couldn't help but feel angry at myself. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? But it wasn't too late. I still had a chance to take control. I wasn't going to let them ruin me. Not this time. The realization was like a slap in the face. I had been so focused on doing what they wanted that I had completely lost sight of my own life. My career, my financial stability, my future, all of it was at risk now. I had allowed myself to get tangled in their web of lies and manipulation. They had pulled me into their mess, and now I was on the verge of losing everything. Sophia had been trying to warn me. She had been telling me to stop, to think, but I hadn't listened. I had been so caught up in the pressure, in the guilt, that I ignored the fact that this was never just about money. This was about power, control. My parents were using me as their pawn in a game they had been playing for years. I wasn't just fighting against them anymore. I was fighting against the life I had built. My career was on the line. My reputation was at risk. If I gave in, I would lose everything. My parents didn't just want money. They wanted my future. They wanted me to finance their failures. They wanted me to clean up their mess. And if I gave in, I would never get out. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I couldn't. Sophia had been right. I had been so blinded by the emotional weight of everything that I hadn't seen the truth. Now I had to act. But it couldn't just be a reaction. It had to be a plan, a strategy. I needed to gather evidence, real evidence, not just the vague documents they had handed me. I needed to find the proof that would stop them in their tracks, something that would expose the truth. I grabbed my phone and called Sophia. I'm ready to take action.
I need your help. About time, she replied, her voice tinged with relief. What do you need? I need everything. I need every piece of information you can find on their investments, their accounts, everything. I need to know what they've been hiding. You got it, Sophia said without hesitation. I'll get started right away. I ended the call and stared at the stack of papers in front of me. I wasn't going to keep running in circles. I wasn't going to let them pull me deeper into their chaos. This time, I was going to be the one in control. But as I sat there, the weight of it all still pressed down on me. I knew what this would cost me. Taking on my parents wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about money. It was about my family, my relationships. I would lose things, people. I had already lost a part of myself just by letting them do this to me. But I had to do this. I had to fight back. I stood up and walked to my desk, grabbing my laptop. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way forward. I couldn't be their pawn anymore. I had to be the one to call the shots. As I sat back down, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. Chapter 6. Turning the Tables. I was starting to think that I might actually get ahead of this. The pieces were falling into place. My parents were knee-deep in something much bigger than I'd imagined. All those transactions, all the secrecy. It was clear now that they were playing a much larger game than I'd originally thought. Then came the bombshell. It wasn't just about money. They weren't just asking for a loan. My parents had been planning to make me part of their web for a long time. It wasn't about retirement. It was about control, about getting access to the real assets. And that's when I figured it out. The ultimate game they were playing wasn't just about bailing them out financially. They wanted me to unknowingly participate in something bigger, something that could cost me my entire future. Sophia was right all along. They had been setting me up, and I had walked right into it. The bank transactions I thought were odd weren't just bad investments. They were part of a larger scheme. The private bank they'd been working with was linked to high-profile figures, investors, politicians, people with the kind of power that could bury anyone who got in their way. The feeling of betrayal hit me like a truck.
All the little details I had brushed off suddenly made sense. It wasn't that they were asking for help out of desperation. No, they had known exactly what they were doing. I had been a pawn in their long game, and they were using my love for them to keep me in check. I was sitting at my desk when the call came in. My dad's number flashed on the screen. My hands shook as I picked up. "Emily, we've been waiting. This isn't just about the money anymore. This is about your future, too. You don't want to ruin everything, do you?" His voice had that familiar tone, calm, controlled, but underneath it was something more, threatening. "I've been looking into it, Dad," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I know what's really going on." There was a pause. Then he spoke again, but this time it wasn't the usual smooth reassurance. "What are you implying?" "I know about the bank, the transfers, the high-risk investments you've been making behind my back. You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you?" His voice hardened. "Don't talk about things you don't understand. You have no idea what you're up against, Emily. You've seen the surface, but you don't know the whole picture. I'm trying to protect you. You're in over your head." It was a warning, and I realized then just how deep the hole went. It wasn't just my parents. There were people behind them pulling the strings, and if I wasn't careful, they would pull me down with them. I hung up the phone, my heart racing. Sophia had been right, but she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole really went. My parents weren't just asking for a loan. They were setting up a trap, and I was already caught in it. I had one card left to play, one card that could stop them from dragging me any further into their mess. I knew where the leverage was now. It wasn't just the money. It was the people they had involved, their connections, their power. They had been using me as their way to gain control over something bigger. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was an asset. So I did the only thing I could do. I reached out to the one person who could help me get out of this alive, someone who knew how to handle this kind of power. I called the lawyer who had helped me with contracts before, the one who wasn't afraid to go up against anyone with more money or influence. "I need your help," I told him, feeling the gravity of the situation settle in. "My parents, they've been using me. They've been planning something, and I need to stop it before it's too late." His voice was steady, but I could hear the concern in it. "I'll be there, Emily. This is big, but we'll get through it. You just need to stay strong." I ended the call and sat back in my chair. I wasn't in control anymore, but this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next steps were clear. I had to fight back, not just for my own survival, but to stop whatever it was they were planning. I couldn't let them control me anymore. But just as I was about to make a move, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my mom. "Emily, this is the last time we're asking. Don't make us do this without you. You'll regret it." I felt the blood drain from my face. They had upped the stakes, and now there was no way out. I was about to walk into the biggest battle of my life. Chapter 7. Putting the evidence on the table. I walked into the room with a calmness I didn't feel. The weight of the evidence I had gathered pressed against me. But it wasn't just the files and recordings. It was everything. The truth, the lies, and the manipulation I had been blind to for so long. Today, everything was about to change. The family meeting was set up at my parents' house. They insisted on doing it there, a place they thought would give them the advantage. It felt like a final play in a game that had already been rigged. But I wasn't playing anymore. I was done reacting. Now I was taking control. As I sat across from my parents, their faces seemed as calm as ever. But I could see it in their eyes. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know how much I had uncovered. "Emily," my mom started, her voice as smooth as ever, "we've been patient, but you need to make a decision. We can't wait any longer." Her words were a repeat of everything she'd said in the last few weeks. Desperate, pleading, the kind of thing I had heard too many times. It was a script they had perfected, but now the lines were starting to sound hollow. I took a deep breath, looking at the stack of papers in front of me. Each document, each message, and each recording I had made over the past week led me here. They thought they had me trapped, that I would be too afraid to act, too afraid of what would happen if I pushed back. But I wasn't afraid anymore. "Actually, I've made my decision," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But it's not what you expect." My mom's expression faltered, just for a second. "What do you mean?" "I've been looking into everything, all of it," I said, sliding a few of the papers toward them. "The bank accounts, the transfers, the investments. You've been lying to me, Dad. You've been using me to clean up your mess." My dad's face hardened, but he didn't say anything right away. He knew it was coming. He just didn't know how much I had uncovered. My mom glanced at him nervously, and for the first time, I saw a crack in their facade. They weren't in control anymore. "I don't know what you're talking about," my dad finally said, his voice low but firm. "Those are private matters, Emily. You don't need to involve yourself in them." "Private?" I scoffed, pulling out my phone. "This is the recording of you, Dad, from last week, when you said you needed money for retirement." I played the audio aloud. The room fell silent as my father's voice filled the air, speaking the same words he had used to manipulate me. I watched his face as the truth sank in. His mouth opened, then closed, but nothing came out. "And this," I said, pulling up a bank statement on my phone, "this is a transfer of $200,000 to an account you never told me about. That's not retirement, Dad. That's money laundering." My mom's eyes widened, but she quickly recovered. "Emily, this is ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about." But I wasn't done. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been planning this from the start. The urgency, the guilt trips, it was all a setup. You didn't need money for retirement. You needed money to cover up your debts. You needed me to help you escape from the mess you made." My father's face turned red, but he didn't say anything. His silence spoke volumes. He was cornered, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of power in the room. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," my dad finally muttered, his voice trembling. "You think you can just walk in here and accuse us of this? We're your parents, Emily. We raised you." "You raised me?" I interrupted, my voice louder now. "You used me. You lied to me. You tried to make me the scapegoat for everything you've done." I stood up, the evidence in my hand like a shield. I wasn't done yet. "You thought I was too weak to stand up to you, didn't you? You thought I'd just write the check and everything would go back to normal. But I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm done being your pawn." My mom opened her mouth to speak, but she closed it when she realized there was nothing more she could say. They had been caught. They couldn't talk their way out of this. "This is far from over," my dad muttered, his eyes cold. "You think you've won, but you have no idea who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm messing with," I said, my voice finally steady. "And now, you don't have any cards left to play." I put the documents back in my bag, the weight of them no longer heavy with doubt. I knew what I had to do now, but I couldn't help but feel the sting of betrayal in my chest. I had done what I had to do. I had exposed the truth, but the real battle was just beginning. As I turned to leave, I knew my parents wouldn't back down easily, but neither would I. And this time, I wasn't going to let them win. Chapter 8. The Consequences. The phone call came early the next morning. It wasn't a surprise. It was inevitable. The authorities had contacted me about the documents I had submitted. The investigation was already underway. I hadn't even had time to process it, but I knew deep down that this was the point of no return. The game was over for my parents. I didn't need to do anything. The legal system was handling it. The evidence I had collected was enough to trigger a full investigation, and with the way things had unfolded, my parents' assets were frozen. They'd been exposed for more than just financial mismanagement. The people they had been involved with, the connections they had built, all of it was crumbling down. At the same time, the fallout from their actions rippled through the family. Relatives who had turned a blind eye for years now turned away from them. The calls stopped coming. The invitations to family gatherings stopped arriving. It was almost like they had never existed. I didn't feel relief, not really. What I felt was something between anger and numbness. I didn't want to watch this happen to them, but it was the consequence of their own choices. They had chosen to drag me into their web of lies and deceit, and now there was no escaping the repercussions. The house of cards had fallen, and they were the ones left holding the broken pieces. I didn't attend the hearings. I didn't need to. The proof had already been laid out. The damage they had done was done. All I could do now was focus on what came next for me. The decision I made wasn't about justice. It wasn't about making them pay for what they did to me. It was about reclaiming my life. I had spent far too long being pulled in different directions, listening to their demands, their guilt trips, their manipulations. It was time to cut them off, to move forward. So I did what I had to do.
I packed up my things from the house I'd grown up in and started looking for a new place. The old house was full of memories, but it wasn't mine anymore. It never truly had been. It had always belonged to them. Now it belonged to the court. I couldn't stay there surrounded by the reminders of the lies. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to say anything. There were no more words left between us. I just packed my car and left. That evening I sat in a small, empty apartment. The silence was different than the one I had been used to in my old life. This silence felt like freedom. The kind of silence that doesn't come with expectations, with pressure, or with the constant need to prove myself. I didn't feel like celebrating. I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to feel, but there was a certain peace in knowing I wasn't going to be dragged back into their chaos. The phone didn't ring with calls from them asking for more money. There were no more family dinners where I had to pretend everything was fine. The only thing left was the decision I'd made, to walk away. The next day, I made the call. I canceled the old number I'd kept for years. I had no intention of holding on to anything from my old life. I deleted all their contact information, erased everything that could bring them back into my world. That night, as I looked around the apartment, it felt different. It felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had faded, replaced by a deep, quiet resolve. The decision had been made, and there was no going back. The only thing I had left was me, and that was more than enough. The final step was simple but symbolic. I stood in front of the door to my old house one last time, holding the keys in my hand. I didn't look back. I dropped the keys into the mailbox, the cold metal clinking as they fell. That was it. The last tie had been severed. There would be no more waiting, no more pretending. The door to that life was closed, and I wasn't going to open it again. I didn't look back. I had nothing left to say to them.